young man in his walking?
Sebastian's making good progress. I don't know if you were brought up to speed, but essentially Sebastian had been withdrawn from school, just from some personal concerns and issues we were having with school. So he's been home educated for the last few months. So we've actually seen the largest amount of increase in. Can you still hear me, Darren? Can you hear me?
Yes, yeah? I can hear you.
Oh, okay, good. So we've seen some really big improvements in him since he's left school. He's being pushed, he's relaxed. He's doing really, really well. Yeah. So he's not running yet.
How's Vicky getting on with that then?
I think there's been a bit of a transition between, a bit of a change in how your days go from, not being homeschooling to suddenly homeschooling, and suddenly your agenda during the day tends to change. So there's been a bit of a learning curve, I think, and a bit of adjustment in life. But other than that, I think it's been enjoyable.
So she's feeling a bit more settled in that role at home?
Yeah, I would say so. I would. There are certainly challenges that keep cropping up, that you can't factor in when you're homeschooling. But when you've got health visitors coming and professionals coming around to visit and talk, and maybe their expectation is that the child's at school or whatever, so it's just about changing those expectations as well. We're actually looking to establish Sebastian in a school locally, in a different school, but it'll be a high school. Sebastian's only 9, so he'll be going into a high school, once we've been able to go around and select, whichever's appropriate and which one suits our needs and his needs best.
Sure, it really sounds like you've identified some issues that have been going on for him, being able to at least address some of those things at home and be in a better place to make some choices about the high school and things for him.
Yeah, indeed. We just saw some behavioural changes, nervousness and tension and stress and emotion in Sebastian, both when he was going into and when he was coming out of school. Just through some of the stuff that we've seen behaviourally taking place. We thought, we need to look into this a bit more. We did. We took a decision to withdraw him from school, and it seems to have resolved the issues.
Just for the other people who might end up listening back to some of this, because I think there's some really great discussion that we're having here. How soon, Paul, did you and Vicky notice the difference in the behaviour and the nervousness and things that you were talking about with Sebastian?
Yeah, we noticed pretty quickly, and then we're going back maybe almost 18 months, 2 years, when we first started to notice, that there were some behavioural issues in terms of Sebastian going in and coming out of school, forms of stress. But there were constant changes and transitions going on with the school and its infrastructure and the people that were coming in and out of the school in terms of the teachers and the classroom assistants. There was always constant change. So in part, we'd rightly or wrongly attributed some of that just to that constant change that was going on within the school. But the more and more we looked into it, and the more engaged we got with the school in order to try and get to the bottom of some of the issues, the more and more apparent that it wasn't just the change which was impacting Sebastian's degrees of comfort, and there were other factors which were increasing his stress and his his general health and well-being. And then we should I say the wife mainly took a proactive approach to just withdraw him from school and go through the appropriate authorities to deregister him.
Sure. For those of you who are listening, this is Darren Humphreys and Paul Boone. Darren Humphreys in New Zealand and Paul Boone in the United Kingdom, having a conversation on Life Real. This is about having conversations about life. It's about sharing stories from the journey, particularly in this case where Paul's been talking about his son Sebastian, and his son Sebastian, his life and the Boone family's life being impacted by Angelman syndrome, and we're just talking a little bit about that today. Paul, just going back to the sort of behaviours that you were talking about, were they just behaviours for Sebastian only, or did they manifest themselves in some other way in terms of relationships with his brother Harry, or particularly with yourself or your wife Vicky?
What we'd noticed is that when Sebastian was going into school and when he was coming out of school, he was becoming very emotional, and there were physical signs from Sebastian. Sebastian can't speak, he can't articulate what's going on in his life, he can't really tell us, what's happening. So we were looking, for the body language and his reaction, to being taken to the school gates, being picked up by the drivers at the school, how he was responding with those people who were greeting him on his arrival to school. And then again, in reverse of what's coming out, so Sebastian's coming out, he seems to get more relaxed the closer to home he gets, and depending on who wheels him, and whoever wheels him through the building, he would be, he'd react different to the people within the school. So it then became very apparent that there was, there was issues in terms of the people. So at home, he was displaying those, what you might call standard happy angel behaviours at home, and he was much more relaxed at home than he was at school.
So would you say that they were perhaps maybe some uncooperative behaviour that manifests itself at home as well, or did you think that he was able to make the distinction more between what was happening at home at school? The reason I say that is it was like if you were wanting him to do some stuff that he didn't want to do, did you think his experience in the school, meant that he was less likely to be cooperative? And
yes, indeed, we had a bit of that, and actually, the longer that we witnessed, his behaviours at the school, being negative, the more and more they started to bleed into his everyday life at home. As we started to go through, we started to experience things like feeding problems. We started to experience things of physical signs of stress, on him, fingers in his mouth, increasingly, increasing tension around raised voices and that kind of thing. We don't argue or fight very much, but it is quite a noisy environment. We just notice that the noisier we get, the more and more stressed he gets. So yeah, it began to bleed into our home environment, and between us we agreed that something had to be done.
What was the reaction when you looked to take those steps through the authorities to remove Sebastian out of school? Was it a helpful or positive experience from the school or the authorities, or with some real issues that you felt? I guess I'm wondering, did you feel empowered to be able to do that, or did you actually find that there was resistance on the basis that, hey, you parents don't quite know what you're doing? The best place for him is the school, where there was some adverse stuff going on. What was your experience there, Paul?
Apprehension. We had been discussing, as mentioned earlier, we've been on a journey pretty much for 18 months previous, talking to the school about, what could be, the problems and the symptoms of Sebastian's nervousness and his behaviour. There'd been several unique instances which could have contributed to it. When it came time for us to actually deal with taking Sebastian out of school, we did it very much. It was a bold move from us, to be quite honest with you. It wasn't something that was done hand in hand with the full support of the school. It was just a course of action which needed to be taken, just for the sake of Sebastian's welfare. And it was, from a higher authority, from other investigations which were going on at the school, which were brought to our attention. We were informed that we did have a right with which to withdraw our child from school if we felt that his welfare wasn't being served and being looked after at that school. So we took up.
Sorry.
Go on.
I was going to say, being that as it is, what words of encouragement would you have to other parents who feel less empowered by the whole school system when they've got those sorts of concerns? Are there maybe what would be maybe 3 key learnings or 3 things of advice that you would you or combined out of yourself and Vicky would give to parents who want to raise those concerns or make those changes when they know that there's something not quite right for the benefit of their kids?
Point 1 is, if you have that gut feeling that something is wrong, you must go with your gut. You know your child best. You must absolutely go with your gut. Point 2 would be bold, be brave. Go down, kicking doors down, throttling whoever needs to be throttled and deal with the repercussions later. I think just from the way that we generally, on a day-to-day basis, Victoria and myself were very laid-back people, and we needed a form of reassurance almost. What we were feeling was genuine. We needed some kind of reassurance that we weren't being paranoid. We weren't being dramatic. And it was a case for us of just realizing that we were just bold. We just needed to go with it, really, and just go with our gut feelings and drive it. Just drive it through. So we were just brave.
Yeah, so you've got to. So just recapping, we've got 2 things. Go with your gut feeling. One of the things that I think it might have been Audrey Angelman or Harry would say, if you want to know what's going on really with a child whose life's impacted by Angelman syndrome, 1, ask the mum. 2, ask the dad, because sometimes I think, I don't know, maybe what dads have got to say don't get enough airing out there. So that's go with your gut feeling. The second one is be bold and be brave. Is there maybe just a third one, something like no regrets?
A lot of the experience that we have is all from hindsight. As I say, we were very nervous and apprehensive going into it. We needed to reassure ourselves, and we needed to assure that we had a case going forward. So part of that being bold and going with that gut feeling, was about informing ourselves, really, more than about informing anybody else. We had to be really sure that what we were doing was right for Sebastian, first and foremost, and that it was also right for us as a family. And it was, everything we've learned so far is, and in terms of having this conversation, it's about, we now have the hindsight, and we understand that we had more power behind us than we originally thought. It was almost an expectation that you have to fight the system and that you have to fight the people and you have to fight the school. That's not the case at all. What you do is you have to fight your case, and you have to fight for the rights of your child and the welfare of the child. So it's just standing up for yourselves, being bold. Don't hesitate. The moment that you identify that there's something wrong, put a stop to it straight away, and just be bold and brave, and you'll be blessed. So just recapping for those of you who've just joined us, this is Darren Humphreys in New Zealand and Paul Boone in the United Kingdom. We're from A Life Real. We're about telling stories on the journey, and Paul has just been telling us about his journey, particularly with his son Sebastian, whose life's impacted by Angelman syndrome. In fact, the whole family is. And some of the challenges that they faced when Sebastian was presenting some behaviours that were not great in his school. So they made the bold decision to withdraw Sebastian out of school, and he's being homeschooled at the moment while they're looking at some alternatives. Paul just shared with us about probably 3 learnings. 1 is go with your gut feeling. 2 is be bold and be brave. And the third one is about keeping yourself informed with that information that you need to be able to make that decision. Paul, would it be true to say also that we're maybe actually stronger and more powerful than we might give ourselves credit for? Do you feel like you felt empowered as parents having made that decision for Sebastian? Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that, Darren. You know, it very much is power to the people, and we do feel much more in control of the activities now in terms of, you know, Sebastian's welfare, Sebastian's day-to-day life, and, you know, the how much we can inform and put structure around him and what he needs to be doing. You know, very much it's a lot of the activities on a day-to-day basis, you know, certainly from a Monday to Friday point of view, we're very much school-led, school-driven. You know, and one of our major concerns was the lack of communication and feedback back from the school in terms of what was happening on a day-to-day basis. You know, that may in part have informed our decision that maybe something wasn't quite right because we weren't hearing back from the school on our questions in terms of, you know, what's going on. Now we've got Sebastian at home, we're engaged in his activities, we can see, we can plan it, we can impact Sebastian, we can shape it, you know, but not just based on a learnings point of view, you know, but also from the life skills point of view as well. It's not just about the curriculum, it's about them life skills as well. And that was probably some of the, you know, the key challenges that we had as part of school, because we want to inform Sebastian's life skills just as much as, you know, literacy, mathematics and sciences and, you know, all that kind of thing as well. He needs life skills.
Sure. I guess one of the questions might have is just about that transition. Those of us who have children who don't face some of the same challenges as Sebastian, like, say, for example, if you were to be homeschooling Harry, Harry might find it a bit more challenging to make that transition when his mum's saying, "Get out of bed, Harry, time to go to school." "Oh, Mum, but I want to stay in bed longer." Tell us a little bit, were there some challenges in terms of that you noticed in terms of Sebastian making the transition from having his education and learning those things outside of the house to actually learning them at home? Obviously, he's probably more comfortable now after a period of time, but were there some of those challenges about engaging that? Like, did you sit down and talk to Sebastian and tell him about those changes that were taking place?
It's a very, very good question, and, you know, matter of factly, we didn't actually inform Sebastian of what was happening, but certainly from a behavioural point of view, I think we could see that he was accepting what was happening. The way that the way he was going to be taught at home was very much, you know, if you can imagine that Sebastian's going to be going to school, he goes out the front door, he goes in the car or the school bus, he arrives at the school doors, and the moment he goes through the school doors, Sebastian knows he's now in school, he's there to learn and do what the school tell him to do. When he's at home, he gets up out of his bed, he eats his breakfast, and then the next thing is, as part of his curriculum, he goes into the dining room, and then there's a set timetable which has been laid out, you know, by his mum, you know, in terms of the activities and the learnings he'll be doing on that day to day. So behaviourally, that's very much a different behaviour. So, you know, I think there was a bit of learning there that, you know, when he goes to the dining room table first thing in the morning, it wasn't just that he's going to be eating his Weetabix or his Shreddies, and that actually it's going to be about doing some lessons. So Victoria had spent some time going through some of the educational requirements that we needed to meet as part of being able to keep Sebastian educated at home and keeping him at home, and being able to evidence and demonstrate that he is being taught according to the current curriculum. But also, I think from more of from a disciplined and regimented point of view as well, making sure that there was a timetable of events that Sebastian could then fit into. So, you know, there were a whole bunch of timetable activities that Sebastian was kept to. Really, he's on what we would call 2-week half term at the moment. So.
Okay, one of the things that you you mentioned, Paul, before was actually about life skills, and often one of the key critics of people who want to talk about kids being integrated and often argue against children being educated at home is the whole question of social interaction. Are there some particular or additional steps that you and Victoria have had to make so that Sebastian's able to engage people socially as part of that whole education, rather than get to the end of school and have his interactions outside of that time?
Yes, absolutely. So, once Sebastian had been withdrawn from school, there was a lot of research done by my wife, who had found that there were local groups of parents who were holding regular sessions and meet-up sessions in community centres and play centres, for kids of varying ages and abilities, and they were they were meeting up and discussing the types of activities they were doing out of school as homeschoolers. So they were going on school trips, they were sharing experiences in terms of lesson planning and delivery, and as well as what kind of events can they be doing outside of the home, which can also inform those educational criteria as well. So if there's going to be history, going to museums and artwork, and going to war museums, or there's a whole ream of different activities which can be done outside of the home but still actually meet the core curriculum criteria, but also actually brings a little bit of a different experience to the individuals as well, and again informs those life skills.
Sorry, often some of the key critics about that we find, particularly for those of us who deal with who have children who have superpowers, that's how we like to sometimes see, taking the disc, a bumper sticker or a sword during the week from an organisation in New Zealand, was the challenge to take dis out of disability. So it's really around recognising presuming competence and recognising the abilities of people, even though they may not be as able-bodied or match the same sort of standards that we use for measuring things. Often some of the key critics of us and how we raise our children are our families as well. What was your experience in that, Paul? Did you have any members of your family say, "Oh, you guys are mad. What on earth are you doing? You don't know what," Did you have any of that sort of thing in the family? And if so, how were you able to put that to answer their objections, Paul?
Yeah, again, another good question. And I think all individuals and all families have that fear factor, and they like to project that fear factor onto other people and onto other individuals. And a lot of the time it's based upon their own fears rather than, fear for the family themselves. It's based on their own apprehensions and their own their own personality and how their personality shape. So we do feel and get a lot of that projection from other individuals, but it's interesting. We take this in very many directions, but from us, we tend to just be a wall to other people's projections of negativity, and you learn very, very quickly, actually that the failings and the abilities or the inabilities or the disabilities, we all have them. Some manifest themselves in physical form, some manifest themselves in mental form. They come in many shapes and sizes, just like all individuals. So I have many inabilities and disabilities, as well as anybody who's in a wheelchair or is on crutches, or so it's a really mixed bag. That's the way I see it, really. It's a personal point of view.
Sure. Hey, you're with Darren Humphreys from New Zealand, and you're with Paul Boone from the United Kingdom, and you're with us on A Life Reel, which are about stories from the journey. Paul and I both have sons whose lives are impacted by Angelman syndrome, and we thought it was a really good idea to get together and to share some of those stories. Well, today actually, and Paul will tell you, we were just going to test some things out. And as the conversation got going, I thought it would just be just maybe a really great encouragement for those of you who might be tuning in today. If you've got an interest in, just to let you know, Paul and I are working on a whole schedule of people to come and share their stories here on A Life Reel. Please feel free to make any comments in the comments below, or to provide us with any feedback as well. We'd like to thank our sponsors, who are myself and Paul at this point in time. And hey, Paul, right at the beginning of our conversation, which led us on to this one, was you recently posted online some footage of Sebastian taking some really good unaided steps, and as a dad, seeing Sebastian doing that one, it really just delighted my heart. Tell me about the sort of stuff that was going on you as a dad when you saw Sebastian taking those steps unaided.
Yeah, it was quite emotional. We have two children. Sebastian was 8 when he took his first steps. So we're going back over a year now in terms of his first couple of steps. But we've got a younger son, 5 years of age now. 6. And Harry, was able to walk from, the usual time frame you would expect from from an able-bodied child who doesn't have any forms of physical or mental challenges. Really, he was about 18 months thereabouts. But Sebastian was our first, and we had never really been on that journey of having a child walk. We were told by most people we'd be lucky to see Sebastian walk. But yeah, he took his first steps when he was 8 years of age. His younger brother was always constantly querying whether Sebastian would be walking. We had done all the usual, physiotherapy and occupational therapy in terms of walking frames, holding his hands, encouraging him. For that day, for it to finally come was fantastic. And it wasn't something we expected either. It just arrived, purely out of the blue. Sebastian had been in the bath, as he commonly is. He got out of the bath and he just appeared to get very, very excited and wanted to propel himself forward. So we thought, well, let's be brave and just see what happens. And he took a couple of steps, and that was it. And then we got him dressed and put him to bed. We were overjoyed. We moved forward almost a year to recently, this April just gone, and it was April last year. Sorry, just to clarify. But we jumped forward a year, and lo and behold, Sebastian again over Easter decided to take more steps independently. This time, it wasn't the fact he'd gotten out of the bath which had motivated him; it was the fact that we had some chocolate in a bag, and we'd basically used that as a carrot and stick scenario. So we started to wiggle the bag of chocolate. He began very motivated by that and excited by it. So we basically used that to push him several times to take more and more independent steps. There's still that element of bravery for him to step out of his comfort zone and to push himself, without encouragement. That'll be for us a key factor in Sebastian's key life skills, and being an individual who can roam and do what he wants and go where he wants. Is when he begins to do that independently and take them bold decisions on his, by himself, without, us having to encourage him or, offer him that carrot and stick, shall we say.
Sure, it seems most appropriate that, that April sort of time falls around Easter, and outside of a specifically religious connotation, that sort of April time when the equinox happens, when the change out of winter into spring is really a time of new beginnings and of new life and of those sorts of things happening. So it's probably most appropriate that it's actually in the April sort of time frame when the winter is broken that Sebastian might be having to taking those steps. And it reminds me, I wrote a blog entry recently just reflecting on my son Elijah. Those of you tuning in, my son Elijah died in 2007 as a result of seizures. That's another whole story. But just about how he was independently walking with a flotation device around him in the water, and how much he enjoyed doing that. And just how there were a couple of things. One, it enabled him to experience sensory things, and two, it allowed him to experience freedom. And actually, I'm just remembering it wasn't actually on a blog yet, but I want to give a plug at this point in time for the online magazine Angelman Today. That's www.angelmantoday.com, or you can also find them on Facebook. That's a great place, particularly if you're a parent with a child whose life's impacted with Angelman syndrome, to hear people's stories, to find out what's happening around the world, to hear about things that are physical therapy, or they're also about diet. There's some really good stuff around ketogenic diet and feeding and people's stories and journeys. I want to give another plug out there, if I might just interrupt for a moment longer, Paul. There was an article that I also wrote about my Angelman Ink Collection. This is my son Elijah, put on my arm for his 7th birthday. So there's some pretty groovy and some pretty funky skin art out there. You can find that. Actually, I'm going to put a link below here on this video so that you can both check out Angelman Today, and you can subscribe. Comes out every couple of months. Or maybe you're a parent who has a child with Angelman syndrome, some sort of angel-related ink that you'd like me to add to my collection, and please feel free to do so as well. Sorry, Paul, those are just a couple of little non-commercial commercials I just wanted to throw in there. But just as we're concluding our chat today, Paul, maybe some comments about how Harry's found just the whole experience with Sebastian being at home, and do you think that maybe as siblings there was some impact on Sebastian's relationship with his brother in light of what was going on at school that you may have seen some improvements in since?
I think, if you wanted to talk about, the impact to siblings, it would be, probably another hour or maybe even more, really, in terms of the impact that we'd noticed in terms of Harry. It's a very hugely interesting topic. It's an emotive one as well. We have lots of thoughts and feelings in terms of how we perceived to be managing a sibling with a brother with a disability. We're doing huge learnings just from that sibling aspect in terms of what it gives us and what it gives Harry. But just to play to your specific and targeted questions. Yes, there was some definite transition for Harry in terms of seeing a lot more of his brother. From when Harry's finishing school to seeing his brother in the car at the point of pickup, which I think was always going to be a positive aspect to it. But also there's also that the negative aspect, which takes some of that personal time and interaction time between, Harry's mum and Harry directly. There's a reduced amount of parent time for Harry, as Sebastian's currently around more. So Harry tends to, play to that a little bit more. We tend to see a little bit more of the behavioural challenges from Harry, as he doesn't get that dedicated time.
Sure, thanks, Paul. We're just coming to the conclusion of this is actually number 2 and completely unrehearsed and completely unplanned. A real life.
Yeah, it was completely. I didn't actually expect it to go there. I wasn't really prepared to be doing a chat, as you can probably tell. I was just, unprepared completely. But I think that's probably the way it goes. There's no shameless plugs in there as well, Darren. I think that's fine in terms of the plugs as well. I think it's, just as I've been through this, and you've asked me to just talk and walk through some of the questions that you've put to me. Very good questions, and I think they do inform a lot of thought, just even retrospectively in terms of myself, as well as actually trying to portray and give a clear, unambiguous message out. I think it also does allow a time for inflection and reflection as well in terms of the questions you're asking, and maybe putting into not just from the journey you've been on from just you as an individual, but also compartmentalizing some of them thoughts, feelings, and emotions into other people's journeys as well. So that's been just an interesting learning from me, just as I've walked through that experience that you and I will hopefully be putting through some of the people who've agreed to come on and do this. I've probably come across, to be quite honest with you, as a rambling idiot. I've got to say it's 3 o'clock in the morning here, so there may be an element of that contributing to it. And there's no angel parent who isn't complete with the giant-sized coffee mug either. This is a giant-sized coffee mug, so that's what keeps me awake at this time of the morning. But I just think, from my own experience, being on the receiving end of the questions rather than, being on the loading of the questions point of view, that's been a really interesting experience, and it was completely unrehearsed, it was unplanned. So that's a really good thing you did there, Darren.
Cool. So you've told us what your favourite addiction is. What's your favourite ice cream flavour, Paul?
Mint choc chip.
What you got a favourite? You got a favourite quote, favourite saying that you've heard recently?
Oh, I have. I'm a compendium of quotes. Really, but no, I'm not going to share.
Come on, what's the one most at the top of your head right now that inspires you? Share one.
It's just one word, to be quite honest with you, and that one word is faith. And I tend to keep that just to me. That's something to me. I'm not a religious person by any great shakes. Those who know me, and know me best know. I'm not. I'm not going to throw myself out there, but faith is just something that I have in myself and in other people, and I just like to keep that to me, almost. I live my life very much as an open book, but my faith is in other people and my faith in humanity, and I allow the faith that I have in other people to guide my decision making and guide my relationships with people. I have very few bones to grind with many people. I have very few bones to grind with any organisation. I'm just an open person, and I use that faith as a way of going forward.
Oh, that's great. Hey, maybe the final thing as we close off here, Paul. If there was anyone who had any questions for you about those, about some of the challenges or some of the things, just to go through those things again, we'll go with your gut feeling, be bold and be brave, and make sure that you're informed. Would you be happy to respond to anyone who posted any questions in the link and the feedback below?
Happy to respond to all questions, any comments, any suggestions. Absolutely open book, not a problem at all. And I think that's what we're looking for, is to give us your own thoughts, give us your own feedback, ask us the questions. And even if you want to sit and do one of these and tell us and share about your journeys, or you want to share something about your journey with us, absolutely get some. Let us know, contact us. And don't forget to subscribe as well. Hit the subscribe button.
Sure. Hey, that's closing off then. This is Darren Humphreys down here in New Zealand. It's 2:08 p.m. And I'm with Paul Boone. Say something, Paul, so we see your face. What time is it there?
It's now 10 past 3 in the morning.
And we're sharing on a life reel. This is stories from the journey. As Paul said, subscribe below. Share this freely, and we look forward to having you with us again as we share more stories from the journey. Take care.
Thank you, Darren.
We can do it. Come on.
Whenever you're ready. Son. I love you.
Go on.
Right, Mummy's got the bags. There we go. Oh, what's in there, Mummy? What's in there, Mummy?
Can you eat them all?
Ooh.
Come on. It's nothing.
Harry. Oh.